Right, okay, so back to the Master Fader series. Let me just expand that very quickly. Go back here and just check that it's definitely recording. Yep, it is. Okay, so Master Fader 5.1. Okay, so yesterday we went through quite a number of options on the actual Master Fader itself. We spoke about, just in summary, we spoke about the quick assign option, the link over option. We pretty much went through everything that's in this section here that you get by clicking underneath an actual channel. We spoke about the different sections within the actual fader itself. Um, you know, what you have on the left as in your subgroups, your VCAs, your mute groups. We also spoke about the volume, the decibels, unity gain, how to set gain. Um, we touched briefly on this section here, and we talked about how this gives you vital information at a glance whilst you're actually doing a show, or whilst you're mixing live, whether it's for your live stream or whether it's for the actual church. At least you can see bits of information without having to constantly click back and forth into a channel, just so you can see what's actually going on with that particular channel. We also briefly mentioned how this section here is sort of over the course of the last two videos. We mentioned how this section here is sort of an overview. Well, it isn't sort. It is an actual overview of every single thing that's going on at any given time on any channel that appears on the mixer. So I know you can sort of use the view group option in this section here to view, a series of channels together. So say channels 20, 21, 22, and 23 were vocals, and you'd had them selected within your view group A, for example. There's nothing in there at the moment, but if you go into assign, what did you say? 20, 21, 22, and 23, right? So these four channels were vocal channels. I'm just going to call them Vox, and I close that. All of a sudden, when you highlight Vox, it just gives you those vocal channels there. So that's one way of looking at a series of channels together if you want to just single them out. But as you can see, this particular page here, you have to scroll left and right. Your VCAs are right at the end. Your subgroups are here. You've got your FX channels, and then you've got all these channels that you have to constantly keep scrolling back and forth. Now you can get much bigger touch screens if you want, and have as many channels on the screen as possible. But if you don't want to do that, you've got the overview page here. And now on the version that I use of Master Fader, and I knew this at the time that I got it, that this isn't possible in terms of being able to actually change the levels whilst you're actually looking at them. Because as you can see, next to each fader, there's this green, amber, and red section, just like you have on the main channel here, or as you have in the individual channel. That should not be the first page that appears. It would normally appear as oh yeah, because I'm not in an actual channel. So if I go into that channel, uh, oh yeah, sorry, it's here on the left. So when you go into the actual channel, as you can see, you've got your fader, and you can make adjustments to that particular channel. And it's got the meter next to it. So you've got the green, the amber, and right at the top, this small red, that box is red to show it's clipping. Next to each and every one of these channels, you can see the exact same setup. So you'll actually be able to see how much volume is going in to that particular channel, and you can make adjustments from this particular page. You don't have to go back to the actual mixer. So this is a great feature on here. But from here, you have pretty much access to everything: how loud your overall FX effects are for the four engines, and you can make adjustments there. And the cool thing about this section here is if you were in one of your subgroups, for example, sorry, not subgroups, your aux channels, your returns, when you come into this section, it'll then highlight it orange. So now you can make adjustments there. Mostly, you'll have a situation where your musicians are doing their own changes. But in some cases, you might have a musician who will say, oh, I'm having problems with my phone or my device. I can't log in today. Can you quickly change something for me? You can do that. And obviously, well, mostly with the singers, you'll have to do the adjustments for them for their monitors, for the actual singers that are on stage, because most of the times you'll find singers will tell you, look, this is a bit too much for me, I can't really be bothered, we don't want to have to control this, we just want to sing. So you'll end up having to do that for the singers as well. um, but most musicians will control their own mixes anyway. But you have access to see pretty much everything, all your aux channels, your FX channels, your subgroups. Um, Now, one of the things that I didn't think it did here, let me just quickly check that. So generally at the minute, if you change or rename a group or a channel, it will rename it there. And if you change the color, it will sort of do it in multiple places. So let's just call that subgroup drums. And let's go to the VCA one as well. And we're also going to call this drums as well. Now you can use the quick assign to do this as well. So we learned that in the last video. If I came here, oh yeah, it did change it, drums. So the name changes uh, on this page as well. That's brilliant. Excellent. Okay, so the names will actually change for the subgroups on this page as well, which is great. I know it doesn't change for the mute groups, so if I was to change a mute group, it wouldn't actually change the name here to, drums or vox. It will just say mute group 1, mute group 2, etc. So that's actually quite encouraging. Brilliant. I love it. So I'm going to come out of this section here because this section is mostly self-explanatory. There's no real need to dwell too much on here. You check levels, add an overview at a glance, you make adjustments if you need to. Obviously, it's a lot more harder with the moving the fader to get precision, accuracy in terms of what you want. But if you notice something peaking at the time someone drops a mic and you're in this particular section here, you can just easily mute it, or if you wanted you can whack it all the way down, because you know that's the mic that's feedbacking. And you don't sort of kill the vibe, if that makes sense, or you don't. Yeah. So I'm going to leave this page here for now. We've done a lot of talk over this main page here as well. So again, I'm also going to leave this page for now. And this is the channel view. At the minute, it's showing me the VCA, because that's what we were last in. That's fine. Let me just come out here, go into there, top side. See, I've got another digital mixer, and to get into the settings, you click at the bottom. Or as with this one, to get into the settings, you click at the top. But yeah, we've talked quite a bit about the actual faders and this top section here. What we haven't discussed at the minute in too much detail is the actual dynamic processing, or what they call dynamic processing on an individual channel. Now this will be true for the subgroups, this will be true for the main left and right, this will be true for the aux groups, and what I'm about to show you is obviously true for the actual main channel. So we're in channel 3 right now, we just picked it at random, and you've got the channel as is, okay, and you've still got your main as is. Let's bring that up to unity gain. The first page you're greeted with is the EQ page. Now at the top left hand corner, we'll go through the page systematically, but at the top left hand corner you can turn the EQ on and off. So if you want to know how much of a difference your EQ is making, or you just want to find out what the signal will be like, you want to do a before and after check, you can just turn it on and off. And when you turn it off, you see all these, they all gray out, and you'll see even when you move the four bands, they call it bands of EQ. When you move the 4 bands around, they're all grayed. When you turn the EQ on, that'll light green, but you'll also see that the different colors that have been assigned to the bands of EQ will now illuminate. So there's more than one way of telling that your EQ is not currently on. The green light won't be on, but also everything will just be grayed out in terms of what bands are there. When you turn it back on, you'll see the colors, so you'll know it's working. We spoke briefly about this RTA feature, and all the RTA feature is when you're speaking in, and in fact, no, I can't demonstrate this way, I thought I could, but when you're speaking, hang on, no, I'm gonna leave it, it's too much. I've got it on my tablet for what I'm currently running for this video, but it's just too much to start turning the cameras on so I can show you. But basically you'll have a waveform going in the background, and you'll be able to see what frequencies are in operation for that particular channel. And you can turn the RTA feature on and off, and that's perfectly fine. You can also change the spectrum. So you can change it from RTA to spectrum, and this kind of changes the display, how it appears. So some people are more, they work better with the analyzer. Other people want to see the spectrum. I prefer the analyzer, so I leave it on there. And remember we spoke about the presets in brief yesterday, and we said you could set up, you can capture profiles, profiles, and you can save those EQ profiles within your presets, and you can recall those presets on any channel that you want to recall them onto. And as you can see, some of the ones that we saved yesterday still appear, despite the fact that I'm not currently connected to a mixer. It's just saved it under my shows. So every single time I open up under default, it will always load that. Now I can open up, in fact I'm not even going to go into shows now, because that's a whole whole new thing. But just remember that it'll save it under your show, and you can go back and recall these within your shows. The other cool thing you have on Master Fade is the fact that you can change between vintage and modern on different items. So if you're like me and you started off on analog, you can actually switch to something that is more analog. Now obviously if this was a mixing desk, this would be the other way around, and you'd have the low frequencies at the bottom, the mid frequencies at the top, and you'll have the high frequencies. And what tends to happen on an analog desk is the low frequencies would be set to, most companies will set them to 80 decibels, 80 hertz, sorry, because that's the sort of universal British EQ, okay? And the mids are allowed to be sweepable, so you'll have a range where you can sweep between, I don't know, 400 and 5000 K. And then you will have 5K, sorry, or 5000 hertz. And so this is 1.6 kilohertz, which is 1600 hertz. And then the highs are normally set to about 14K or 12K on most mixing consoles, or at least on the common ones, Behringer, Yamaha, etc. Because this is digital, even though you've switched to vintage, they still give you the option to select specific frequencies that you can adjust. So you still have the option of adjusting low frequencies as low as 35 hertz, which is brilliant. I mean, most common speakers will output from 20 hertz to, what are the highest I've seen? I think I've seen 20,000 hertz, 20,000 hertz, 15,000 hertz. I think some speakers can go up to 22,000 hertz. So the speaker is telling you that I can send out signals, and this is just a normal full range speaker. I can send out signals from as low as 20K and as high as 22,000. And then you obviously have sub speakers that can go lower, etc. But here you can select the frequency, and then this adjusts how much volume. So you've got 0 decibels all the way to -15. So here you're saying, if you had selected 60 hertz, you're saying I want to cut that frequency or lower that frequency by here at the moment it's 10 decibels, and then you can come to the mid range and then you say 3.2. No, I don't want that much, I want it to be 2.4 decibels. And then on the high frequency, I suppose if it's a mic, you could take it as high as 15K, and then you can determine how much of the highs you want. The cool thing again is you can, when we spoke about the let me just quickly switch back here to modern. We spoke about how wide you can make this band by adjusting the Q. Okay, on the vintage one, they've actually given you the option to select between narrow and wide. Now you can't see how big or how narrow the Q is, and normally you can't really do that on a normal British EQ vintage EQ on the EQ, sorry, on a vintage device. But they've thrown the option in there anyway because they want to give us as much features as possible. Then obviously you've got your high pass filter, so anything below 50 hertz here will not be included. So there's no point in you trying to EQ 35 hertz when your high pass filter is saying that it's not going to play any volume below 50 hertz. So always be mindful of that. And as we were making these adjustments, guess what was happening on here? It was following the adjustment. So if I click on that, you can see it's on 50 hertz exactly. Now the difference between these two, and this is quite important, at the minute within normal, whether you produce or whether you do live sound, different consoles and different devices that you buy and you plug into your either your hardware if it's a physical device, or your software, i.e. plugins. You could get a compressor from one company and a compressor from a second company. The two compressors will work differently. So even though you've set them at the exact same position, they will give you a different feel. Some will be a bit more warmer, some will be a bit more sort of tighter, some will be a bit more darker, some will be a bit more lighter. There's different feels you get from different products. This is why some people say, no, I only use certain types of compression, because they tend to do certain types of music, and those compressors are better for that type of music. With here, if you get given a vintage and a modern option within Master Fader, it also changes the output. So for example, the vintage EQ tends to be a bit more warmer, it tends to be a bit more kinder, and if that's the kind of feel you're going for, always use the vintage over the modern. The modern tends to be a bit more precise. Therefore, if you are EQing something, you'll tend to get a bit more accuracy out of it, but it also means that when you're listening to it, it's actually quite, how can I say it? It's wherever you've turned something up or down, it's very sharp and it's very prominent. So you might get a sharper feel from the modern to what you get from the vintage, and that's just EQ in general. Now these options here are obviously changing the height. So for example, we'll come here and there you go. G changes the height of the volume, sorry, from high to low, and this will give you more accuracy. Once you've picked, if you select that and you want to specifically pick 2500, now you might get, some singers actually know what their EQ settings are for specific mics, and they'll come with their microphone and they'll tell you, right, if you're going to EQ my voice, set my my mid to 2.5k, and cut it by 4 dB, and then set my highs to this and boost it by X dB. Some singers will come to you and they'll do that. So you can actually just key in those parameters if you wanted to, but this allows you to actually do it with pinpoint precision, in the sense that if I'm using this, it's free, it's all over the place. If I find a frequency here that I don't like, if I try and bring it down with my mouse, I might end up going left and right and not pinpointing on that specific frequency as much as I'd want to. Whereas if I just simply take this and I'd use it, then I know I'm doing it with accuracy, and I'm going to pull that frequency out because that's the one that's causing me problems. So you can use these options instead to accurately find what you're looking for, and to accurately remove, add, and to change the different parameters for that frequency. So I use a combination of both. And then obviously with your bell and your shelf, this is just the shape of the low frequency. So that's the bell, looks like a bell. And if you shelve it, it looks like a little shelf, so like that. Okay. This adjusts the high pass filter. And it lets you choose with more accuracy as well. Okay, moving on to the next section. So here you've got your gate. So similar to the EQ, we can rush through this quicker because we already know what's going on. You've got your green, means on, and when it's not on, everything grays out. So you can quickly tell they've just kept the same theme in the background, so it's not confusing. Likewise, you can switch from modern to vintage. And that's what it looks like when you're using the vintage gate. And likewise, when you're using the compressor, that's a vintage feel compression. The VU meters do actually move. They put a little screw there. Not that that actually helps, but it just makes it look more like it's in a rack. And they've obviously got the modern. Now you'll tend to find with the modern you can do a lot more because they include a lot more features, whereas with the vintage ones they're more restrictive. But if you're an old school mixer, an old school sound guy, you'll be quite happy with that. And yeah, you can adjust the different parameters for your gate. Uh, I'll quickly run through gating because I know we discussed compression in a previous video, so I'll quickly run through gates. So all gates are is they allow you to choose in terms of volume, and in some cases with some gates that you have out there, they also let you pick the parameter, the frequency, sorry, as well. But all the gate does is if you tell the gate to close, and then you tell it where you want it to close, it won't let anything in unless the specific thing that you've told it to allow through to come through comes through. So if it's in this case we can't do it with frequencies, but we can do it with volume. And how the gate works is, say for example you're in a noisy room, the congregation are making a lot of noise, and that noise is being picked up by some of the microphones that are closer to the congregation, or somebody has a mic that's in the actual congregation and people are talking, and you don't want that to translate across to your live stream, you don't want it to come out of the main speakers. What you do is you come onto your gate here, and as the individuals are speaking you'll see the volume levels, or you'll be able to see the volume going into the actual microphone itself. Okay, so you'll see how loud the volume is, but the gate will be a red bar that'll appear here coming in the opposite direction, and what it's doing is it's shutting, and then when the thing that's supposed to be allowed to come in, that red bar will disappear and go up, and you'll start to see the volume come up. If the gate stops here, the volume will only come up as loud as there. Okay, so what you do is if there's people talking in the background, you would change the threshold, and you can see it's going up in decibels from -80 all the way up, all the way up, all the way up, and you would keep moving this forward until that background noise is dead. But you wouldn't move it so forward that it then stops the person who's going to speak into the microphone from being able to speak, because the gate is not allowing that volume level to go through. So you'd move it up until you think, okay, this is quiet enough on the mic, or in most cases it'll kill any background noises completely. So that's why this will give you the difference between cleaner mixes that sound really professional, very clean, very nice, and noisy mixes that sound like, my gosh, this is horrible because the mics are picking everything up, and it doesn't sound nice. So you'd use your gate, mainly you'd use them for the drums. That's where most people use gates for. I like to gate microphones as well because I don't want background noise, so therefore it means that the whole mix is going to be nice and clean. You need to think about that when you're doing your live streaming. But yeah, for drums, you don't want the situation where the drummer is hitting the snare, and all the other 7 mics are picking up that snare as well. And you don't want a situation where the drummer is hitting the kick, all the other 7 mics are picking up the kicks. Then what's the point of putting individual drums on the mic when if the drummer hits a particular thing, all 7 of them pick up the same volume? It's pointless. But if you know what you're doing when you're placing your mics on the drum, and you know what you're doing with your gate, personally I would say you would put for argument's sake, if we're talking about a snare, you would put the snare mic in close proximity to the actual skin of the snare itself, and then that way, when you turn the volume or the gain up, you have a situation where when the drummer hits, the microphone can pick up the drummer hitting the snare, even if it's at low volumes. Now the advantage of that is it means that the background noises are going to be much, much quieter. If you have your volume and your gain so high, yes, when the drummer hits it, you'll be able to nicely and clearly hear that snare's been hit. but the background volumes will also increase exponentially, and they'll be so high such that the gap you have in your threshold will be so small that by the time you've put your gate threshold up, it's also taking out some of the impact of that snare sound as well. So the closer you have that mic to the surface of the skin of the snare, it means that when he hits the snare, that's going to be really, really loud, but there's not much else coming in from the other parts of the drum because the volume is not strong enough to pick those things up already. Then what you would do is you'd move the threshold for the gate, the volume, to say, I want you to be so high such that anything quieter than the impact of the stick hitting the snare, kill it completely. So what would happen is this gate would then shut. It will shut completely. And what would happen is it would only open when it hears the snare hitting, which is going to be a much louder volume. And then the gate will open to let the snare in, and then it'll shut. Okay? Now with other gates, you can have them with actual frequency selectors, which is much better because you can single out certain frequencies. Now I know the hi-hat and the snare are somewhat problematic because they're both loud and they both share similar frequency ranges, but that's fine. If you do the frequency and you do the volume, you can safely single the two out properly. In this case, we only have the ability to do just the volume with this particular gate. In fact, let me just check the vintage one. Yeah, it's fine. So yeah, so obviously be mindful of how you use this because it can actually cut out the sounds you want to be heard, and it'll thin them out so much so that you're not getting a nice clear sound. So just be very careful with how high you turn this up. Most people tend to go overboard with the threshold, and it just kills the mix completely. What the range does is you can determine how much you want the gate to close. So when the gate is fully shut, this red bar will be all the way down here. Now if you have the range full like that, it means the gate will completely 100% shut when that snare is not being played. If you bring the range back, it would mean that the gate won't fully shut. It'll leave a little bit of sound left in the background. Now one of the advantages of doing this is when the drum is playing that particular instrument or when the vocals are going into that particular mic, what you'll tend to have is a situation where you can still hear certain resonance in the background. So it doesn't completely shut that thing altogether. So things like toms, for example, you want that boom that carries on, particularly with the floor tom, to continue. So if you shut that completely, you'd be killing off the sound of the floor tom altogether, and it doesn't have that dynamic range. Or with microphones, you want it to be a little bit more softer. Plus, you don't want a situation where it's very obvious that the gate is fully shut, because say for example it's a speaking mic. Sometimes if you set these parameters badly and the gate doesn't attack quickly, the first few words or the first few seconds that are spoken will be quiet, and then all of a sudden the gate will open up and the person will speak. So every single time they go quiet and the gate shuts, there's no way of them being able to always be heard. So just be very careful with how you play around with it, but you can remove the range a little bit just to allow for the volume to still remain there and the gate isn't starting from a completely shut position. It's a lot more easier on the ears. Again, with attack and release, it's the same as with the compression. How quickly do you want the gate to kick in? Obviously, if you have it down here, it means the gate will interact straight away. If you bring the attack there, it'll wait 300 milliseconds before it comes in. And again, these are advantages and disadvantages when you're coming to your drums, how you like your drums to sound, or how you want that particular thing to work out. You can have a slower attack, so the gate will wait a little bit before it captures that sound and quietens it down. Your hold is how long do you want the gate to hold in terms of milliseconds. Now with hold, hang on, let me just see if I can refresh my memory. Okay, I'm not going to talk about hold because I'm not too sure whether I'll be giving you the right information. I believe it means that when the gate shuts, it will remain shut for a certain period of time before it reopens again. But I'll leave that for now. I don't tend to mess with the hold feature for what I use the gates for. So that's that. I'll leave that as is. And then again with the release, it's the same as what we discussed with compression. When the gate kicks in, how quickly do you want it to release again afterwards. So you've got those options available to you there. Okay, I'm going to quickly move on, but before I move on, like before, you can store presets. So if you have a particular drum that you use and you know you're going to be moving that drum from one room to another, in some cases if you want to keep the same presets on the toms for some of the gates with the compression, then you can do so. It may not always be the same sound you'll get when you move it to another room, or you take it to another venue, but at least it's a good starting point. If you know that those functions, that preset works well for that particular kit, or that particular mic, then you will know when you go to another venue that, okay, it's a good starting point. I just need to make minor adjustments rather than starting from scratch. It saves you on your setup time. Okay, I'm going to quickly move on. This is the last page. Now the last page, again, we talked about source where you've got A and B, but we'll go into source a little bit more when we come to routing. We've obviously got gain on this page, so you don't necessarily have to go into the gain section in the routing to do so. As you can see, that's channel 3. I'll whack this all the way up to the top, come off it, and you'll see the gain has also gone all the way to the top here. Bring that down and you'll also see that the gain has come down here as well. So that's the gain. That's your trim. You've got your 48 volt power. This, I believe, is the polarity reversal button. Oh yeah, it is the polarity. And you've got where this particular channel 3, let's just say this was a hi-hat. Let me just turn the light on my keyboard. Hi-hat. Okay, so this particular hi-hat, this section here determines where you want the hi-hat to go. So remember, we've got the hi-hat in the subgroup for the drums. Okay, and we can put the hi-hat, we've got a VCA channel for that, so we want it to go there first. Then from those two channels, they'll go to the main mix. And how you do it, I mean, it's already set up here, but you see we've taken the hi-hat out. This is already set to receive signals from those subgroups. Now in certain instances, so for example things like your kick and your bass, those things, because you guys have subs, or if you have any subs, those particular instruments would be good to send them, particularly for the venue you guys have, directly to the subs and take them out of the top speakers. Because what that does is it gives you extra clarity, in the sense that you don't have something like the kick, something like the bass sharing the same speakers as what you want the keys and the vocals and guitar maybe, etc., coming out of the same speakers. And it gives a nice cleaner, more sound. And it's the difference. The difference is similar to listening to or watching a movie from your phone, using your phone speakers, to watching a movie using your surround sound system at home, or watching a movie in the IMAX cinema, where there are different dedicated speakers. So someone's walking and then you just hear the footsteps in the speaker that's on the back left hand side, because on the right hand side speakers something else is happening, and you just have that clarity, 3D surround sound. So in some cases what you would do is you want the bass to go into a subgroup, but you have that subgroup connected to a physical sub speaker. Okay, and then you take the bass and the kick out of the main. So let's just say the bass is the kick is channel 1. So no, let's just say the kick is channel 8 and the bass is channel 9. You take those out, but you only send them to the subgroup, and then you plug a physical speaker into your subs. And then what would happen is those sounds will go straight to the subs, and you can control them from there rather than having them. How can I say this? Rather than having them in the main top speakers. I hope that makes sense. Okay. Right. Quickly moving on. Just gonna quickly go back to channel 3 where we were. Disappear from my screen. Oh yeah, it's because I clicked this. Okay. So yeah. What else? Yeah, so you've got your mute groups, and we're not going to put a hi-hat in the view group for Vox, but you can put the hi-hat in the view group for drums, and we can obviously set that up through the view groups here. We don't necessarily, let me just, so that it aesthetically looks correct. I think it was view group 3. There we go. So you can have it in the view groups, and then this will just give you an overview of where you have your different I'm just doing this for aesthetics purposes, but it's where you have your different items for that particular channel. So that hi-hat is going in there. It's not going to the main, it's going to a subgroup. Then from the subgroup, the subgroups are set to go into the mains. So if I'd removed that from the mains now, your hi-hat would go into the subgroup, and then from the subgroup it would just stay in the subgroup. But because I have that subgroup coming to the mains, it will go out of the main speaker as well. Yeah? Okay, cool. Come out of this, go back into that. See, I always make this mistake because I'm so used to using another mixer. Here on the right hand side you can see a visual of how much of this channel is going to aux 1. So let's just say, for argument's sake, aux 1 is the singer's monitor, so you can have a bit of hi-hat in there if they ask for it. Normally singers don't tend to like the hi-hat. Some lead singers will tell you, I just want hi-hat, snare and kick for timing. That's all I want. So yeah, some people want it, some people don't want it. You can have some of it going to the keyboard. They don't tend to like that. You can then have it going to the drummer's mixer. It'll be quite high in the drummer's ears because the drummers always want more of everything. A bit going to the bass. Maybe that individual doesn't want it. Now what we're going to do for the purposes of setting up a live stream is, let me just quickly go into here. There we go. I'm going to link channels auxes 7 and 8. Okay. And then I'm going to call these live stream. Boom. And as you can see here, aux 7 and 8 live stream. Now you'll notice underneath, this is for hi-hat, by the way, how much hi-hat is going in, and you can see it's even changed that to yellow there. But you'll notice underneath here you get the pan option, and it's because I've linked two aux channels together, and whenever you do that, it will give you the option to actually be able to pan the sound on that particular channel, because it's now in stereo. It's no longer in mono. And the reason why I've put it in stereo is when I send out the aux feed to the live stream, if I have a drum panned, I've got my drum kit panned to the left and right, I've got my singers panned to the left and right, I want the people who are listening to the live stream to be able to hear the different, the clarity in the different panning options that is available. And that's why I would use two channels for my live stream, which is left and right, is because that's what I want them to be able to hear. So, I mean, you can see all of a sudden, even though I'm in the hi-hat section in the live stream, which is aux 7 and 8, because I have this going to subgroup 1, which is blue, the VCA 1, which is green, and the mute group 1, which is red, this will also show me that information here as well. But notice I'm looking at the live stream. So this is one cool feature another cool feature of this particular section of the screen. Now, I'm going to go through this very quickly with you now. I know this relates to live streaming, and it's not necessarily just related to the usage of Master Fader, but when you pair up your aux channels like this, okay, I want you to see something. If I mute aux, if I mute anywhere, aux 1, aux 2, it mutes everything. It's muted the channel there. We're in the live stream. If I come back to the main and I go back to here, it's still muted it there as well. It's muted it everywhere because I've pressed the mute button on this particular channel here. Now, let me just quickly go back to where we were. Okay. Now, one of the cool things you can do with Master Fader is you can decide over here that I want this channel to work pre-fader. And what that means is, if I change the volume level for what's going to the live stream, okay, it doesn't affect what's going to the main left and right. Okay? So that's one thing you would choose, and that separates the two volume levels. So you can turn the hi-hat up in the live stream, it won't turn up in anyone else's monitor. It also won't turn up in anyone else's in the main mix as well. Okay. If I decided to turn this, up and down, that's fine. It will literally just change it for the hi-hat. So I'll definitely tick pre-fader. If you tick post-fader, it then means that if I was to come here, go to the mains, and I was to change the volume here to 10 dB, and I come to the live stream, why has this not changed? Oh, sorry, it doesn't change. This is me losing the will to live. Sorry. So what this so what this changes is when the signal is coming into this hi-hat is coming into this particular channel here, whatever adjustments I make here will change the adjustment volume in the main mix. Whereas if I left it on pre-fade, it would only affect, if I make an adjustment here, it would only affect the adjustment within this particular these particular two channels, aux 7 and aux 8. So it would send that signal out whatever adjustments I make on the main page would if this was post, whatever adjustments I make on the main page would affect what goes out to this channel. This channel will be at the mercy of the main fader on the main page. If it's pre-fade, if I make a change on the main front of house, it won't affect what's going into this aux. And the thing you don't want is, you don't want to, if you're in a church and you're in a particular building, in a particular room, you don't want what the mix you need for that room you don't want to send that mix out to your live stream, because it may sound right for the room you're in. If I was to change your room instantly in a second, you might find, things are now, the volumes need to be changed because they're not working the way I wanted. I was in a more open room, so I could do a bit more, but now in a closely confined room, all these volumes are too loud, so I need to change the volume levels. So you want to be able to change the volume levels in what you're sending to the live stream, different to what you're sending to the main. I hope that's clear enough. Another thing you have the option of doing here is using the left and right which is the main left and right mute, and using the main left and right pan. So basically, at the minute, if I was to mute this channel right now, here, and it's better if I illustrate it from here because it gives you a better idea of what we're talking about. There we go. If I was to mute this channel here, or anywhere else, it would mute it everywhere. But if I take the left and right mute off, you'll see that all of a sudden here, I can change the mute for my aux mute. That's what AM means. And it won't affect the mute everywhere else. So I could mute it there everywhere else, but on the live stream the volume is still going. Or I could mute it in the live stream, but everywhere else it's still working. So it's independent mutes. And what you'd want to do for your other monitor sends that you send, so for the keyboard, if you need to mute something in the front of house because somebody's dropped a mic next to a speaker, a monitor, or because something is happening but the musicians necessarily aren't being affected by that, if you hit mute on your mains, it will cut that signal out for the musicians as well. And in some cases you may not want, maybe a particular singer is singing really bad and it's quite evident in the main mix, but nobody else is complaining. If you wanted to, you could mute that individual from the front of house, and they'll stay in their monitor. But if you have it set to main left and right, the second you mute them from front of house, it'll also mute them in their monitor and everyone else's, and everyone will know what you've done. So it's always best with your monitor mixes or your live stream mix to don't use the left and right. And likewise with the panning as well. So you can change, say you had it in the building that you're in, that the hi-hat is panned to the right because that sounds aesthetically correct because of the way in which the building is shaped. But for the live stream, because of what you're choosing to send, you may not send everything to the live stream, but you might want to pan it the opposite way. You can do that and it won't affect what's in the front of house. And when you make a change front of house within the building you are, it won't affect what's going to your live stream. So it's fully customizable. So this is a really, really important feature. So you can mute and you can also do your pan differently. And as you can see, the second I moved something and I panned something, all of a sudden, boom, it's telling me what that is panned to on this screen for that hi-hat. Okay, so this is very, very important. It's something that you should take note of when you're doing your live streaming. Okay, right. So this pretty much covers what's inside an actual physical channel when you're dealing with it. I'm going to unmute that here because it's not muted in the live stream. Oh, it is muted in the live stream. So you see, it remained muted in the live stream even though I've unmuted it in the other place. I'm also going to unmute it in the live stream as well. And just to show you this for illustration purposes, I've muted it in the main, but when I go back to the live stream channel, it's unmuted. So that can still pump, it can still go out. Okay. So that pretty much covers an overview of how your different channels work, or the different options within the actual channel works. So it covers your EQ, just an overview of that. It covers your sources, where you're sending things, your gain, etc. And it also covers your gating and your compressor. And that's just an overview. I think the best thing to do now would be to stop this video here. And then what we'll do is when we come back, we're actually going to look at this is the motherlode for Masterfit. I think this is the place where I would say they did the best. They did their good work, the best of their work in this section here. And this is where the effects engines are. This is where your routing engines are when you're connecting to a device. This is where your general settings are. This is the mother. This is where your routing, your individual routing sections are. So you've got input A, input B, USB. So earlier on, you know how this was saying A and USB is B. Okay, you can have it routed such that you've got a whole different routing option for input A. And just to give you a rough idea of what I mean by that is you can have, for argument's sake, you can have this set up for your main praise and worship session, and you have a second group that are going to come in and sing using the same instruments and mics, and you can route this. Currently it's routed to USB, which is why on the other screen you're seeing it as USB 1, but you can also route these to the mic preamps as well. And then that way, when you go into the individual channels, rather than it saying USB like it did before, it's now routing B to mic pre B. So which means you've got two channel options virtually for the same one individual physical channel on your mixer. So you know channel 3 where you plug the actual cable in, that's one, but it splits it into two, and I can have a different set of options and instructions for B than I have for source A. And then when I'm ready to switch across, I just hit source B and it'll take that forward as opposed to what I had on source A. And you do all of this through your actual routing, but for now I'm going to leave that as where it is, which is USB 1 to 32. And then you've got your USB options here for routing, you've got your output options for routing, you've got your talkback, but we'll talk about all of this. You've got this section here, and then you've also got your shows, and again channel saves. You can add little notes for yourself so you know, on this particular one, be careful with the drums, and also channel 6 is for this, but I've also, you can leave yourself little notes so that when you come back you know what's going on with the different show that you've set up, and the different snapshots that you have as well. Cool thing about snapshots is, say for example you're having an event that at your church that you want to live stream out to everybody, and you have a situation that at this event you're going to have about 6 different groups performing. Rather than using the A-B routing that I was talking about earlier on, what you can actually do is you can set up different snapshots. So if I went into, right now we're on that, if I went into this, okay, and I was to hit, in fact, that's fine, okay. If I went into this and I was to hit recall, it'll ask me, are you really sure you want to do that? And say yes. Now notice how channel 3 is now showing as channel 3. There are no longer any options like what I had before in terms of these being selected or not. It just gives me something new altogether. Okay, some of the features did carry across, and that's fine, it's because we're in the session. If I went back to the default and I recalled that, okay, this will show me, because I didn't save, and that's fine, but this will show me when we first opened up Master Fader before we started this video. This is how Master Fader looked. There were no settings, I'd done no changes, still on channel 3, nothing. And because I didn't save that, this was I probably should, what I was supposed to do is save it first and then show you the difference afterwards, but I didn't save it, but that's fine, we'll still see a little bit of a difference. But with your snapshots, you can do an entire mix for the first group, save that as snapshot 1, and then you can do, the second band can get on and they can do their sound check, and then you can set all their levels, their EQ, name that group 2, and it'll save every single change that you made. Okay, and then you can come back into your routing and get the third team to come on and add another one, and then this you can name, so you can just say church B. It'll help if I can spell, but that's fine. And then you can add another one, and you say, okay, the third group that's going on is called Zamar, for example. So you can just say Zamar. Okay, and then you can save that, and so on and so forth. So when they're switching between the different sets, and Zamar is coming on, you sound check them as number 2, but then they're coming on early. You don't have to worry too much about writing scripts and everything. You just come into Zamar. You would have saved it at the time, by the way, by hitting replace. You recall Zamar. Bam. All your settings that you had for them are available. And if you'd set up all the live streaming and everything for that as well, it will also translate across to here. Now I know it's a lot of work to do once, but once you've done it, it makes your day a lot more easier. And the cool thing about using this digital mixer, and a lot of digital mixers offer this as well, is you don't have to be physically with the mixer to set these things up. Um, so you could be at home with your tablet, set it all up whilst you're at home, set up the new channels, set up what you want to add to them, da 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 da. There's certain things you won't know how they'll sound. So for example, things like EQ, that you'll have to do on the day, but at least you'd have asked them, okay, how many musicians do you have? Oh, you've got a drummer? Okay, you have a bass player? No, you don't have a bass player. You don't have to set up a bass. You can set all the channels that you want. And then if it's a choir, you can say to them, okay, how many people do you have on mics? How many do you have in your soprano, your alto, your tenors? Okay, da da da. Set most of it up the night before, show up on the day, and you've only got half the work or less than a quarter of the work to do. Okay, so that's the brilliant thing. You just connect into the mixer, upload the information, and you're sorted. So I'm going to stop the video here because yeah, I think this is a good place to stop, and we'll carry on a different day. All right, peace.